Hello and welcome back to the Untriggered Parenting Podcast with me, Paula Sampson Lawrence. On today's episode, I speak with Bijal Shah, a bibliotherapist, counsellor and author. She's a founder of Bibliotherapy, and today she talks about the use of literature for mental well-being for both kids and adults. Let's dive in. Well, welcome to the show, Bijal. Nice to have you on the Untriggered Parenting Podcast. I would love for you to introduce yourself so that myself and the listeners can get to know you a little bit better.
Hi, Paula. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a bibliotherapist and an author, and I use essentially literature as a therapeutic tool. So I use literature to prompt conversations in a bibliotherapy session, which is essentially a talk therapy session. But I also use literature as, I curate literature for people who are interested in what to read for certain issues if they don't necessarily want a therapy or counselling session. So that's fine as well. So I call those personalised book prescriptions. So essentially, I explore issues through literature, and it's very much a form of art therapy. And we use both reading and writing techniques. So what I call creative bibliotherapy techniques will have a lot of sort of literary journaling or writing letters or writing poetry or reflective practice, which is similar to journaling, but some differences. Narrative therapy, yeah.
I think a lot of people will go, bibliotherapy, they might have never heard of it, or they think it's to do with the Bible, or so biblia obviously means books. So we know, and then it's therapy. So, and you mentioned that it was kind of like an art therapy. So could you just maybe expand on what bibliotherapy is for those who've never sort of heard about the term?
Sure, it's the use of literature as a therapeutic tool. I've got a proper definition that I use at book therapy that I'd like to share with you.
Yes, please.
So bibliotherapy is an art therapy that leverages the power of stories to heal. Its magic lies in the relationship formed between the reader and the writer, and the writing, fiction or non-fiction, poetry or essay, and the reflection of the thoughts, feelings, observations, and lessons that the writing provokes through a daily journaling practice, which I refer to as literary journaling or counselling. So essentially, that's the definition that we use at book therapy.
Oh, excellent. It sounds like, so it's not just sort of reading books or finding books to help you with whatever issues you might be facing, for example. It's also you yourself taking part in the writing process.
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely, and that informing our conversation for talk therapy or our conversation, just generally, from a parenting perspective, which you use developmental bibliotherapy a lot, which is really to assist your child's development and reaching milestones through guided literature, and that could be fiction or non-fiction.
Yeah.
But for children's bibliotherapy, we use a lot of like developmental literature.
Yeah.
And even things like, sometimes it's poetry. They can all trigger emotions in children, and essentially being able for children to be able to talk about their emotions and how they're feeling through books, because often they don't have the language. So the books language is absolutely wonderful. And so we do use it in that capacity quite a bit.
Well, that's excellent, because obviously the podcast is all about parenting, raising children, kind of family life. And there's so much sort of challenges that parenting presents. I'm sure you'll understand, and my big thing for a lot of parents and mums in particular is sort of self-care, which journaling I think really falls, into. So what sort of things can bibliotherapy help with in terms of parenting challenges?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, from the more therapeutic issues to things like dealing with anxiety or dealing with bullying or feeling sad, all of these children's literature can really help facilitate the processing and understanding of those emotions, which can often feel quite daunting to a child. And then there's, like I mentioned, also the developmental side, like introducing them to something that they've never really come across before. For
Mm.
example, if it's a toddler, like even reading like potty training books, picture books of them, that's great. Or if it's a teenager, like books on puberty and navigating that is also really helpful. So depending on what stage of life your child's in, there's always different books that focus on those milestones and helping them, come of age, I guess, through the literature.
Yeah. And what sort of things are really helpful for the parents? So are there things that sort of help, I don't know, maybe relieve stress?
Yeah, so from a parent's perspective, and which would be adult bibliotherapy,
Yes.
literary journaling is very sort of, spot on.
Yeah.
That's a foundational tool. Just writing down a few things that you've been, that's been triggered for you
Mm-hmm.
just from reading the book or reading writing. Often the writing is serving as a prompt, and we all have a million things running through our minds
Oh,
when
yes.
we're reading, and it's essentially thinking, oh, that's really interesting, or that sort of really resonated with me, or hang on a second, there's something in there that I want to explore a bit more. Writing that
Mm-hmm.
down. Stream of consciousness, writing things down,
Mm.
talk about how you're feeling, talk about what it's bringing up for you, go back to it, try and make connections and links. You don't always have to, but you can take it to a counselor,
Yeah.
or you can just look at it, reflect on it, come back the next day, come back in a week. Do you still feel the same if you want to do it yourself at home? And I think one of the hardest things that people find is understanding how, like, what prompts they can use, because I think prompts are really vital. So I
Mm-hmm.
have like a little ebook on my website called 365 journaling prompts for people who are sort of a bit stuck and not sure
Oh, I love that.
to start. And it's just different prompts, just little things like, how did this character make you feel? Or was there a passage that stood out? Why do you
Mm-hmm.
think it's standing out for you? What prompted you to pick up this book? What were you looking to explore? Just sort of diving into these things then leads to more conversations or thoughts, which are very,
Yeah.
important in your own journey. And just writing in itself is very healing and therapeutic because you're using it to process your pain, your emotions, and that in itself is a very healing exercise
Yeah.
for parents who want to even just use it as stress relief and just getting things off their mind, off
Mm-hmm.
their chest onto paper. You know, just that sort of act of taking things out of your body and outside of yourself and externalizing it can also start diminishing the power it's having over you. So,
Totally.
that in itself is just very relaxing as
Yeah.
a starting point. And then, of course, if you want to go deeper, then there are other things that I suggest, like letter writing. Letter writing is a great tool, either to the author or to the author or the character writing back to you, because it's a great way of feeling seen, even though it's
Mm.
you mentalizing you writing a letter from yourself to the author, and then the author writing back to you. That
Mm-hmm.
shift can actually help you feel very seen. So depending on what you're looking like, if you're feeling a bit invisible, it just
Yeah.
depends on what you're looking to address, then I can give you more specific
Yeah.
techniques. But if you're not a journaler and if you don't like writing, then the other thing you can do is record yourself voice notes and listen back to them because they're very healing as well. So I call that audio journaling. But I have like loads of these techniques in my,
Yeah.
which I'm hoping that can help that person pick out the exact technique that might help them. But of course, here I'm kind of giving you an overview and a general.
Yeah. 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 Of course. And I think that reading, parent and child reading, is something that families do to kind of not just increase their child literacy, but also to have that bond together. And so, what can we add to that? Do you think, from a sort of bibliotherapy perspective, that can take it a bit more further and to sort of increase that bond with your child?
Absolutely. I think committing to read together every day is such a wonderful way to build that parent-child bond. But also looking at it's the way you sit, looking at each other, facing each other, or if they're very small, then putting them on your lap, looking at the pages together, almost bringing both of you. It's like being on the same page, literally.
Yeah.
And that can, foster more understanding and empathy because you're now using the book as a focal point to communicate with each other and
Mm,
really understanding what the other person's seeing and what you're seeing and
mhm,
communicating, engaging with your child. That touch as well, when you're close, that intimacy. It's very nice, and I think it's a great way of building that bond. Um, and I mean, I do I talk about parent-child strategies that you can use.
mm.
And I don't necessarily talk about it in the book, but I have a children's bibliotherapy skills course and a raising a reader and storyteller course, focusing on either bibliotherapy skills or like these parent-child strategies, uh,
Yeah.
to build up the bond, to build up a love of reading, um, help building up your child's empathy. That's
Yes.
an emotional regulation. It's such a vital tool for
I
parents.
was going to actually just move into that because it's not just, it's for both parents and children. I think a lot of parents, they need that in their parenting to be able to model to their child emotional regulation and empathy and we have to go first. We have to model that first. But a lot of parents don't know how to do that. So it's kind of trying to teach your child things that you might not necessarily know how to do naturally yourself. So
Yeah.
so yeah, so do you have any sort of so would you recommend books in that situation, or will it be more sort of journaling have about pinpointing your emotions?
I would really encourage reading together,
Mm-hmm.
and asking questions about how do you think that character's feeling, or how,
Mm.
if it's nonfiction, how do you think that person's feeling?
Yeah.
Because that focus on emotion and learning to work out how somebody might be feeling from the context that you're given is a really important skill in empathy building. And then not only does that enable your child to mentalize and understand how the character's feeling, but they might also be talking about themselves,
Mm.
character. So it's also allowing you to understand what how the child might be feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and then reflecting that back to them is also validating their experience, and that in itself is empathy building,
Yeah.
the child. So, both of those ways are reading together and asking questions about the story, and sense checking how the emotional elements in that story.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. If you let us know what your book is called and what kind of prompted you to write it.
Sure. I mean, it's actually called Bibliotherapy, the healing power of reading. And it was a book that was kind of around, and I'd written a book proposal, and I wasn't sure, and I had lots of client stories
Yeah.
swimming around in my head. And I felt that there needs to be a real awareness of bibliotherapy. I still don't feel like there's enough people know about it.
I
So my
agree.
goal really is to I thought with a book, it's a really good way of spreading the message. And
Yeah.
I felt like people need to see the practical application of it. And so the middle section, it's three sections, and the middle section of the book is client stories and how clients have used bibliotherapy, what books they've read,
Mm.
the issues they've had, and how those books have helped them, and what techniques they've used. So some of the
Mm-hmm.
ones that we discussed today. And anything from like mother, my second story is about, being just becoming a mum for the first time, and overwhelmingness of it all, from the
Yeah.
isolation to the constant demands to putting yourself last. I mean, there's so much in there, so many emotions to unpack. And so,
Mm.
one of the client stories focuses on that, and also getting back to yourself, and finding space for yourself, and a career or whatever that you want to pursue. Um, and then there's other books on like, I mean, other stories on like one of them is about a cancer, um, someone who's struggling with terminal cancer.
Yeah.
I also have books on like children and how they've used stories on how children have used bibliotherapy. So from dyslexia to couples bibliotherapy, how couples can use reading together as a form of re-engaging and rebuilding a bond that might be sort of, after the post-children years might have sort of weakened. Rebuilding that, and also group bibliotherapy, and how shared experience can minimize things like loss and grief. And I focus on grief as the theme, and miscarriages and things like that. So the middle part is really about those client stories, and then of course the end is about, I have tons of reading lists, the last section on just every sort of mental health theme under the sun, and A to Z of reading lists for addressing different issues. But then the first section actually goes into a history of bibliotherapy, and it's this sort of idea of therapeutic reading has existed for years, since the ancient Greeks, and how it's developed. And then I talk about the different pillars of bibliotherapy and what it actually is. So there's different parts of the book address different things, but I'm hoping it's I'm hoping it's an interesting read, and eye-opener for a lot of people who want to use reading themselves. Like, not everyone wants to go and see a therapist or a counselor. They just want to be self-help techniques that they can use at home. So, really try to do that with the book.
Yeah. It sounds really, really comprehensive, and I agree with you. Sometimes people want a sort of therapy, but not necessarily want to go out and seek somebody to talk to or that kind of thing. So it's good to always have different ways that they can, self-soothe and, self-help themselves as well. I wanted to ask though, just from a more personal view, did you use bibliotherapy yourself before you went into it, and did that prompt you going into the whole thing?
You're spot on. I used it in my own sort of training. I had to see a counselor, and I found myself just reaching out to books a lot, to stories a lot, to really explain how I was feeling. The literature giving me all this language, or the language of experience faced by others, explain how I was feeling. Essentially, when we read other people's stories of what we are also going through, there's a real sense of identification, and then connection that we feel that relaxes our defenses, allows us to explore certain emotions maybe a bit more safely, feeling less threatened or judged. So it kind of holds our pain, brings our pain to the forefront. And that's half the battle, the pain that's stored, the emotions that are stored, taking them out, externalizing. That's half of the therapeutic process. So that's essentially what the books are doing.
Yeah, I really love that because and I was thinking about this in terms of my children, but even for myself, where I've been going through something, but you can't quite articulate what that is, but then you read something, and whatever that person's going through or how they describe it, you go, yes, that's the feeling, that's the emotion, that's what I'm feeling. And and it's like you said earlier, at the beginning, before when we started talking about young people, children especially, not having that language to express what they're feeling, but being able to read a story and go, yes, I feel like so and so feels in that book. And I just that is super important, not just for children, but for adults too, who can't tap into what that emotion that they're feeling is.
It's having these reference points are really, like, they're holding us up, and they're allowing us to explain our own life experience. They're advocating. It's advocating for us, really. So um that's why it's so important.
And what's kind of your hope? I always ask the people I talk to what's their why they do what they do. But with your book, what's your hope and your big vision, your dream for it?
I would love everyone to sort of incorporate a little bit of bibliotherapy in their lives. I'm sure lots of people already do. I'm sure everybody's felt like books have been medicine for them or they've been good for their soul. And I feel like everybody should literary journal. Like I feel like everybody should take up journaling, because I think my hope is that everybody leverages their reading through bibliotherapy beyond just passively reading something. Like you can get a lot out of your reading if you just journal, if you just reflect on what you're reading a little bit more. And that's what I mean by leveraging. Just, there's so many more insights that we can gain, and I think that is what I'm trying to sort of teach people and get people to do. If it changes someone's experience of life, and also helps them process their pain, then that I feel like is a job well done. But
Absolutely.
right? Like sometimes you just need that little thing just to get us through, and then we're okay.
Yeah. And with your book, tell us when it's going to be available and where people can purchase it.
Yeah, sure. So it's available on all the channels wherever you like to shop. So if you like Amazon, it's on Amazon. If you like Waterstones, it's at Waterstones. If you like bookshop.org and want to support the indie bookstores, you can get it on there. There's also a Kindle version. And if it's not available in your country for some reason, you can always order it from the UK website and just pay a little bit more for shipping.
Excellent. And where can we connect with you online? Where can we find out more about what you're doing and what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Instagram. I'm on all the social media channels, to be fair. Instagram seems to be the most popular, but yeah, so I'm on Instagram at bookTherapy_by_Bijal. Lots of book recommendations on there. Lots of book recommendations.
I was going to ask, do you have things that we can like your book recommendations that we can then go away and look more into?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, if you subscribe to my newsletter, I think I do send out bits and pieces of information on on bibliotherapy, what it is, my own personal story, how I've used it. And then I've also got a 40 best books of the year from last year to read this year, 40 books.
Oh, please.
24.
Yeah.
That you might be interested in. But on my blog, there's tons and tons of free resources on different books for different issues. I also have a book A to Z, a book prescription list. Refer to yeah, so lots of free resources on my website that I would say just go and check out.
And just to finish up, what would you say to somebody who's sort of new to bibliotherapy and or a bit skeptical, about it, that can make them go, yeah, I think I would definitely check that out?
Yeah, I would say just find something that you love to read, a genre that you like, that you really connect with, or a story that you really connect with. Make a habit of trying to read that every single day for a week. Write something or highlight something or annotate something that's really like stood out for you. And then at the end of the week, come back to it and then see how that's made you feel. And I think that in itself will sell you the idea that you are getting lots out of your reading. And yeah, just honor your feelings, honor your intuition, honor all the things that are coming to you or being said to you whilst you're reading. Yeah. And you'll see the difference. Yeah.
Perfect, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And yeah, all the best with your book. We can't wait to read it.
Oh, thanks, Paula. Thank you so much. I'm really excited for you to read it and, look forward to your thoughts. And thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. I loved all your questions as well. Those were great questions.
Oh, thank you. It was really fun. Thanks for listening. See you next time.